Greetings, everyone. My name is Stephen Neely. I am your co-host for the Virtual Dalcroze Meetup. This is meetup number 61, which means there are 60 prior hours of meetups available at the Virtual Dalcroze Meetup website. If you click on our archives, we are thrilled to welcome what is already a really great crowd here today. Some new faces and lots of good friends that we have had attend many. The conversation today should be great. We have three really talented and brilliant researchers with us who are just going to share a little bit of their practice and then invite us into a small conversation. I'm sure our hour will fly by fast. Before we get into all of that, we're going to stick with tradition here. Tradition dictates that we have a quick, and I mean quick, breakout room where everybody has a chance to introduce each other. Introduce themselves to each other. When you get to the breakout room, we invite you to share your video, tell everybody your name, where you're located, and who do you teach, or who did you use to teach, or who might you teach, or whatever the equivalent of teaching is for you. What do you do? But again, name, location, and who do you teach? You're going to be called back in 2 minutes. It's a very quick turnaround. So get ready, buckle up, ready, set, and go. Hey everyone, welcome back. I hope you had barely enough time to introduce yourself to the other people in your room, just to give you, the littlest sense of who is all here. And as you keep coming back, you'll have a chance to say hi to these people again. Before we get to our main events, we always have a couple little announcements. We want to remind you that there are some upcoming meetups and master classes, and we're in the middle of a short course. So you can know when the meetups are coming two ways. One is to subscribe to the mailing list for the VDM, which is if you go to our website, there's a simple little, just type your email address there and you'll just get the emails. They're not too many and they're really thoughtful. We work really hard to not spam anybody, but they keep you abreast of what's going on in the community. And then secondly, we strongly encourage you to subscribe to the calendar. And so if you go to the calendar page on the website, there's a simple way to subscribe to the calendar. And what's so nice about that is because we're international and we have people always from all different parts of the world that attend these meetings, time zones are always a challenge. And the easiest way to know when the meetup or the masterclass or the short course, when it is meeting in your time zone, is to just subscribe to the calendar, and the calendar automatically adjusts the time to your local time. And so
We
that's
are going into the season in which the US is going to change from daylight savings to normal time, but at a different time than some parts of the world. And then some parts of the world never switch. So it just gets awful for the next month. And we do double check all our time zones that we publish. But if we don't publish your time zone, the calendar, the Google Calendar is the way to go.
It's the way to go. So we strongly encourage you to subscribe to that calendar. Coming up soon, October 21, 22, I think I have those dates right, as 21, 22 is Iru McAllister. Iru McAllister Tsai is a diploma holder who lives and works in Taiwan. We had the nicest time meeting and talking with her this past summer when we were all together in Geneva, and we're just thrilled to be featuring her at the next masterclass. So if you are like me and have not taken a class with her before, you should be extra excited to get a chance to work with her. The reviews are amazing, and she's lovely. We had the nicest interactions with her when we were all together. So I'm very much
She
looking forward to it.
also presented at the meetup, the last meetup we had, or two meetups ago.
Yeah,
So you
right.
can
I
also
think
get
two
a
ago.
sense of she a little bit introduced her masterclass there.
Yeah. There was some stuff about calligraphy writing in Chinese and all sorts of cool things. I think it's going to be really outstanding. So if you haven't registered for that, please sign up. Then after that, the next masterclass is with Beth Ann Hebron. who lives in Wales, Beth Ann Hibron James. Her masterclass is November 18 or 19, depending on where you are in the world. And we encourage everybody to sign up for those even now, and then you can be on the list to get the information about those. And then lastly, we'll just remind you that the short course, Gamify the Curriculum, Winning in the Elementary Classroom, with our dear friend, Anthony Molinaro, is ongoing. If you haven't made it to the first couple weeks of that, I think there's still a little bit of a chance to catch it live. And then, of course, you can always register for any of the past master classes or short courses after the fact, because you just get access to the recordings. So if you would like to see what's been going on in Anthony's class, and the reviews have been outstanding, and we just love him and are so excited to be collaborating with him. We encourage you to register for those and see all the good stuff that's going on in Gamify the Curriculum. I'll hand it over to Veronica for our events of the evening or daytime, depending on where you live.
Okay, so we have asked 3 people from our community today who are active in research, and so our hope is to have them share a little bit about what they do, and then have a conversation about how it might affect those of us who are in the research field, or those of us who are in the practical applications, teaching or performing or exploring this, and just kind of merge the worlds that, in my experience, are often a little bit separated. So if we could ask you to present in this order: first Eric, and then Luke, and then Andrew, and I will give you we'll ask you to stay within 5 minutes. I'll give you a 1-minute warning. So Eric, the floor is yours.
Sorry, I missed your last sentence. You'll give us a 1-minute what?
I'll give you a 1-minute warning. I'll jump in and be like, 1 minute,
okay.
please. And we'll, of course, hear from you in the discussion as well. So this is just.
So I've got 5 minutes. So
yes, if you don't mind to start. 5
yeah,
minutes.
yeah. No, that's
I'm very
fine.
generous. I'm rarely like, oh, you must stop now.
I'm sharing my screen now, and I've just got 2 slides. And I have more to be happy to say, but this is just a sketch of an idea that I've developed since the last conference. Many, many strengths to the conference. One of the ways I think we could improve it involve practice reflections in a couple of different dimensions. But for now, one thing I'll speak to is there are a lot of Dalcroze teachers out there, very passionate about what they're doing, seek out very interesting educational situations, develop very intriguing curricula, therapeutic treatments, etc. They're often very eager to get involved in research for, I think, 2 reasons. One might be to disseminate what they're doing, not just one directional, of course, but to become part of a community of people who are doing such things and interact with the world of developing knowledge and maybe contribute to it, maybe learn from it. And another reason you can do research is for your own critical analysis and self-reflection, to become a better teacher yourself. So there's often quite a strong interest in research from Dalcroze teachers for these 2 reasons. And they've often found themselves doing very innovative, path-breaking things. And the challenge there is it's certainly possible to learn bits and pieces about research, but if you want to use these research methods well, and you want to understand the landscape, know what to choose, and develop your study design and so forth, you really do need a degree. I don't think there's any shortcut to that. And so that often leaves people wishing they could connect with someone who has a degree. And also, you often need approval of what we in my scientific part of the world call an IRB, Institutional Review Board. There's usually, in the UK, they might call that ethics review. So that generally, if you want your research to be disseminable, you need to have certain people sign off on it, clear certain hurdles. This generally involves institutions. On the other side, you've got an early career researcher who has the research skills and has the institutional backing. This person needs to publish intriguing things in order for their career to develop. But setting up those real world situations, I watched people do that when I was a PhD student at Edinburgh. It's very difficult. You have to kind of get the school district and the teacher and everyone to sign up on board. You have to find the situation. You have to have a motivation. And so they're often looking for those kinds of intriguing opportunities that they could write up and publish and build their reputation. So this very broad idea, on which I welcome anyone's feedback at any time, is to create a research incubator that matches these 2 types of people. So on the one hand, you've got a Dalcroze teacher, and they, by working with the early career researcher, they ensure that their research design and their research methodology, write-up, publication, etc., is all in the hands of a trained professional. Meanwhile, the early career researcher also gets handed a very intriguing educational situation on a silver platter, and they will hopefully be able to have some rich material to write an exciting new publication that will be useful for their career. So this is a process that I'm pushing forward very slowly. I do have two education professors who have expressed great interest. I won't say who they are because there's nothing official. It is going to move slowly. I welcome any contact from anyone who's interested in this idea on either side, and as well as any feedback. So it sounds like I beat the 1 minute warning even, but that's really the gist of it.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Eric. We really appreciate it. And we'll talk about it soon. So moving on to Luke, please.
Okay, I'll share my screen too. So good evening. So here, what you see here is actually one of my driving ideas in all the research I do. And it is that I think that in instrumental music education, more than going always to this effectiveness and so on, and, you know, trying always to instrumentalize whatever we do and achieve very high levels, that is that we should also care for well-being of the students. We know there are many problems, physical and mental problems among instrumental music students. So what I see it as a synergy between the development of well-being and the development of your musical skills, let's say. So these are the two strings of the DNA of instrumental music education to me. And the letters that connect the two strings, let's say, that for me is the PERMA model of well-being. That's Seligman. And he gives these 5 building blocks of well-being: the P for positive emotion, the E for engagement, the R for relationship, the M for meaning, and the A for achievement or accomplishment. Of course, in 5 minutes, I cannot explain them all, but it's worth to have a look at that. So basically, I try to make, now I have to see how it works. I cannot go to my presentation. Why is that? Next slide, please. Sorry for this. It's not working.
Maybe push the play button at the top.
Yeah, that was not the idea, but okay. Okay, good. So here you see actually a kind of a model that again drives me. So you have my driving idea, and then you have the driving theoretical framework actually, and that is what I developed together with Melissa Bremmer. So for me, that's also research, is developing theory, because that helps me to create my practice. So here the theory I try to make is what I call, together with Melissa Bremmer, embodied music pedagogy. And the idea is that learning is something that emerges from the dynamic interaction between the teacher, the learners, and the learning content. And the way we shape that dynamic interaction is by using constraints: environmental constraints, individual constraints, and task constraints. So, and here comes for me the idea that is, if we want to really get that synergy between the development of well-being and the development of the musical skills, that is that we use the PERMA building blocks of well-being as kind of drivers for the design of our lessons and how we use the different constraints. So that's, you can read about that in my publications.
Very good. Luke, are you on the second slide now? Because right now I think we're still seeing the first slide. It seemed like,
okay, I'm on the second slide.
Yeah, hit your arrow, maybe hit your arrow to the right, or click.
Yeah, that's what I'm doing.
There we go. That's your, so now we see embodied music pedagogy. So
Okay.
we're on your second slide now, and that's a fancy grid. So thank you.
Okay. So you should see but then I need to push play, and then, okay, and now I go back out of it. My God, it doesn't work. Sorry for this.
No, that's okay. We're doing just fine. If we were able to get to the second slide, I bet we can figure out how to get to the third slide.
Now everything blocks. I don't even have a cursor. What the hell?
Maybe that arrow key again.
You hear my sounds? That's nice. No. Everything is blocking. Okay, let's see what happens. Can you stop my sharing, Stephen? Normally,
Yes.
as co-host, you can do that.
Yeah. Stop. Got it. We'll figure it out. This is
Okay.
this is not. Eric gave you an easy extra 2 minutes, so we're
Yes, okay,
we're
yeah.
fine here.
Still, we don't
That's
like
that's why I don't like to hit F5 on my power.
it. Let's see it like this. Do
Okay.
you see it now?
Yeah, we see it there.
Okay, great. So the dynamical system of a lesson, learning emerges from the dynamic interaction between teacher, learners, and learning content. And I try to shape that interaction by having the PERMA building blocks as a kind of beacon in everything I do. And that's how I want to create the synergy. Now, for me, and the problem stays with this thing. Do you see it?
Yes.
Now, kinesical approach?
Yes.
Okay, good. So what I try to develop is to develop a method for instrumental music teaching in which I integrate movement. So my students, you could say, when they learn to play the clarinet, they move a lot. Sometimes I say it's a la Dalcroze, but then in the instrumental music lesson. And so here you can see the premises of this approach. So it's about not about developing the dancers or something with the instrument, it's about developing the inner musician. It's always, or most of the time, involving the instrument. It's bottom up, so no choreographies that decide beforehand how you have to move. Children and students, they find their own movements. We start very simple, it goes to complex, and we also exercise the performing body that is basically directed at the degrees of freedom, for example. Do you see this? Now, okay, great. Okay, so what I try to do is actually based on all those theories and these premises, I try to come up with categories, and I use those categories here. You see a few of them to design my lessons. Okay, so you can see them: space, structure, status, and so on. And so for me, these are the building blocks to design lessons. And that is actually what I do in my research. So for example, here I did a study for 1 year with 6 children. They learned to play the Dood. That is a child-friendly version of the clarinet. And so for 10 months, or 9 months, they actually learned to play this Dood with all kinds of movement exercises. Yeah, so movement activities while they learn to play the instrument. I do a lot of things. Of course, I videotape the lessons, but I also do questionnaires, interview with the kids, with the parents, and so on, just to have a lot of data. And then I try to see what actually this way of working, whether it is something or not. Because I want to understand how we can use movement in the instrumental lesson in early childhood. And so here you can see, yes, 1 minute, okay. So here you can see a follow-up project or a project that comes into it, because I want to understand movement much better. So we will look at 5 skills levels, yeah, so beginner, intermediate, advanced, and so on. And so we will use actually, we will investigate musicians in the lab with all kinds of sensors to see whether we can find something over all the skill levels where we can see changes in, for example, the way they move, the way they use the brain, and so on. And that is all to understand how it works, how the body works while you are playing. And that I can use also in my exercises. And then another one, and then I'm finished. That is, how can I use all that knowledge in new technologies? So here, for example, we have we try to get funding for this, is the Amuzar project. So where we use glasses, AR glasses, yes, to augment instruments while you are playing, and that can help you to think of certain movements while you hear, for example, play the djembe. But we want to create that in different environments also when you play the clarinet or the violin or piano or whatever. So that's in a nutshell, and very quickly, due to all those problems with Keynote. Voilà, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Luc. Really appreciate it. Andrew.
Great, thank you very much. I'm really happy to be here. I've had the pleasure of meeting many of you in my interactions with the Dalcroze community over the years. So it's nice to see you all again, and nice to meet some new people today too. My name is Andrew Goldman. I am an assistant professor at Indiana University. Here, I teach courses in cognitive science and in music theory, and I direct the Music and Mind Lab, which I was going to tell you a little bit about today. The Music and Mind Lab is a group of people as well as a physical space within the Jacobs School of Music here. So I direct the lab together with a colleague in music education, Pete Mixa. We have a graduate student working with us, Megan Kibler, and several undergraduate research assistants. The lab works on a variety of topics in music and science. We use different methods to investigate different kinds of research questions. So all pertaining in some way to music and science, and in particular, music psychology, music cognition. So some of our work is behavioral and perceptual. So how do different groups of musicians perceive and understand music? I'll give you an example. Actually, I'll just maybe give you the example now. We recently completed a study that I think may be of particular interest to this group, looking at how entrainment to a beat changes people's perceptual sensitivity at certain points in time. So this is an idea that I think can quite clearly or directly be discussed in the context of Dalcroze pedagogy. We found that trained percussionists had this stronger effect of entrainment on how it changed when they were able to perceive things. So I'm happy to talk a bit more about that in the discussion if it's of interest. It's a behavioral kind of a study where we play people musical stimuli and we ask them to respond by whether they can detect certain stimuli at certain points in time. We also conduct neuroscientific experiments using our EEG setup, electroencephalography, in which we can measure voltage changes on the scalp due to brain activity. We just got our EEG system installed, so we're working on some developing some new projects. In the past, I've worked on applying EEG to understand improvisational processes. I'm happy to talk a bit more about that work in discussion as well, but that's another method that we use in our lab. There are also computational approaches. Regarding how we can take large collections and samples of data, usually musical scores, digitized musical scores, to try to make inferences about how they go together and what the people who made them were thinking and what kinds of relationships we can find and see only with using computational methods. And finally, we also do theoretical work. This is the more music theoretical part of my research, but this includes topics like writing about what we stand to gain in principle from applying neuroscience to music studies and what some of the challenges are. I think that some of the things that Eric was talking about are very much related to this sort of idea. Who knows what, and how do those different kinds of knowledge intersect? In the case of my work on music and neuroscience, I'm interested in how music theorists and musicians can interact with neuroscientists in the way that they influence, the work that is done and the kinds of findings that are interesting or meaningful. A neuroscientific finding I do not believe is inherently meaningful. So it takes some meaning to interpret and apply it. So also I've worked a bit on categorizing different types of improvisational processes. In particular, for instance, comparing the way that instrumentalists improvise with the way that people who perform through writing computer code improvise. So thinking about different kinds of improvisation. So we do behavioral work, we do neuroscientific work, computational work, and theoretical work in the lab. I will just briefly share my screen here to show you our lab website, if I can find the right. Oh, this is it. Okay, so we do have a website. I invite you to go to our website if you're interested in this work. It has a bit more about some of our recent projects. I described some of them today, but you're welcome to read about them in a bit more detail. I can put the link in the chat if that's helpful. Also has a bit about the people in our lab, myself, Dr. Mixa, and our graduate student, as well as some of our other students who have done research with us. So appreciate the chance to be here and tell you a bit about what we're doing, and I look forward to an interesting discussion with colleagues and with all of you. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. This is great. Well, how cool are we? What a great group. And I'm so happy to have all of you here. When Eric led there and he said the conference, just in case anybody isn't on board, the conference that Eric is describing is the International Conference of Dalcroze Studies, the ICDS, which we just concluded this past August at my institution here in Pittsburgh at Carnegie Mellon University. The ICDS will next be held in 2025 at Luc Niel's institution in Luxembourg. And so we're all really excited and are already preparing for that. The ICDS is one of, or maybe the premier place where this type of research, any of the kinds of research that's been described here, would be one of the premier places to feature some of that research, to share it, certainly with the Dalcroze community and hopefully with the community larger. And so just, I want to make sure that we keep putting the ICDS on everybody's radar. Such a great, I think this is ideal. We have a really nice range here of examples, from working with the children one-on-one through brain scans and things that are, more theoretical, and everything in between. And we have opportunities for the uninitiated to get involved. Does anyone have either questions for either of our three speakers or just comments on what do we think of the role of research in modern Dalcroze / music education spaces? And go. Go ahead, Veronica.
My sister is a neuroscientist, and I've had those conversations with her, Andrew, like, okay, so what? Now we know this, but I already knew that. So I guess I am curious to hear more about what you think the meaning of that research is and how to make it meaningful.
Yeah, thanks. And I come at this question also as a musician, and I feel inherently kind of skeptical of it myself. I do the work too. So I have recently tried to write a paper trying to explain my position on this matter of like, why are these things meaningful? In the same paper, I also describe what I think the problems are, but the things that I find to be meaningful are that I believe that neuroscience in principle offers us a mechanistic explanation of certain musical capacities. So explaining which parts of the brain do what to give rise to a behavior. And I think that is something interesting to know about the world. Whether that has practical applications in some way, I'm not sure in itself, but that's one thing it gives us. I think it gives us the ability to compare. Through looking at brain activity and brain mechanisms, we can sometimes reveal that two behaviors might actually share common mechanisms, or that some two things that appear to be the same are actually different. So I think that neuroscience sometimes can give us that. And then finally, I would say that neuroscience offers us a physical handle on mental phenomena. So it allows us to intervene on perception and behavior, even if we don't fully understand it in some complete metaphysical sense of like what's going on in the mind. It still gives us a physical handle on mental phenomena. So for instance, things like music therapy that apply neuroscience, or brain-computer interfaces that use brain signals to interact or interface with machines. So I think those are the major categories of contribution that neuroscience offers.
Thank you.
Can I ask, I might ask a similar question to Luc. I just came from teaching a class of Dalcroze students, and I was telling them what my afternoon held and that I was getting ready to come to this event, and was saying, what is the role now of research in music education compared to what was it 20 years ago? And I was also saying sort of how sort of proud I am that our Dalcroze community is more and more turning this direction. And so maybe, I don't know if Luc, if you have a couple words that you might share about, why do music educators even need research? Like, aren't we here just to help the kids feel the music or know something about their instruments? So how do you, when you're working with your students, your university students, how are you describing the role of research for the practicing music educators?
Okay, it's a very interesting question, Stephen, and we actually talk a lot about it also because I teach academic writing, and among music educators, the academic writing is often they have a gut feeling against it. So for me, the academic writing is actually part of becoming a researcher and dealing with research. And what I often say to them is that actually it helps you to become autonomous as a teacher, because very often we copy. We do what we have always known. We do what we see with others. My question is, do you come up with things and how do you do that? And then there is research findings, theories, they can help you to think for yourself, let's say, and not just copy what others do and seems like very successful, but you start to think about a lot of things. I've experienced it myself from the moment I started to become a reflective practitioner, let's say, based on theories, based on research findings, and of course, based on my own experience and that of others. But I think it's an integrative thing you need. So the research, the theory, and the practice, for me, they go together. And basically making you a reflective practitioner.
Yeah. I'm going to paste the link to the Donald Schoen book if you all aren't aware of this research. He was sort of what I think of as the first guy who was able to say that your actual work, your like hands-on doing, can count as knowledge creation, as opposed to only the version where we're pulling sort of statistics in a sort of, in these other sort of more traditional scientific models. So a useful book to be aware of if you're not aware of it. I was thinking, I was talking with my students about this, and saying that, well, some of what we're doing is we're trying to, I think, as Luke is saying, we're trying to, recognize that there are different avenues for being a creative in, or to be generating new information here. There's also some out of this are ways to just be able to prove to myself, to my students, to my administrators, or to my students, or to just other communities that there's something happening in this room. Like, we as educators often have this gut feeling. I know we're making progress. I know there's changes that are happening here. But in many cases, if you don't have the right language to share it, or if you haven't found enough of the right words or enough of the right data, not everybody's willing to pay attention. And so even just opening the door to understanding how research is described in a sort of a more global space can often give us cues as ways to frame what it is that we're doing in a way that will be understood by a wider audience. Eric?
Yeah, one anecdote that might be informative. When I first started giving end of the year concerts and whatnot at a place I used to teach called Special Music School in New York, the principal, the music director, came up to me and said, "That was really cool what you did with them. That was really hip." And Dalcroze teachers don't often get to be called hip. And so I reflected on that. Why did she think my Dalcroze end of the year presentation was hip? And the answer is because if you are up to date, educational theory, neuroscience of education, the Dalcroze approach, taps into a lot of the same veins of discovery happening in those kinds of fields now, including neuropsychology, music more broadly. And so that's an opportunity, I think, for us to understand that this century-old method, can meaningfully attach to these new theories and is in a way quite a contemporary method. But you need to have the bridge between the practice and the research to be able to articulate that to, say, a school or someone overseeing your work.
So good. John, I saw your hand was up a minute ago. I don't know if your comment still.
Yeah, I think it might be. I've got a few comments. I'll try and put them in an order. First of all, thank you for this opportunity. I think it's a really important conversation this evening, this afternoon. I think in terms of what Andrew was saying about the sort of usefulness of neuroscientific research, there's just one piece of work I remember being quite interested in, which was jazz musicians who were improvising, and they were actually in a CAT scanner, I think. So they were improvising on like a keyboard that was on their lap because they obviously had to lie very still. And what the researchers found was that the areas of the brain to do with language processing and communication were really fired up when they were improvising, which kind of, you might think, well, that's obvious, but it might not be obvious either. And I think just the idea that we can think about musical activity in terms of other parts of human experience, such as language and communication and expression, might give us some metaphors or ways of thinking about what we're doing. I really appreciated, Luke, your work there and bringing well-being in. I think it's really, really important. And the next ISME conference in Helsinki next summer is very much about sustainability of music education and well-being as a part of that. So that's important. And I'm just doing the edits on an article about Dalcroze and Perma. It's a literature review article, which will be coming out later this year, and it will be open access. So hopefully you can all read that, and that might be useful. And yeah, just to congratulate Eric on his idea as well, and just say, you know, I think this is a really important thing to try to do, pairing up researchers and practitioners. Might be useful to find examples of where that's already happened as a result of the ICDS potentially, and those could be like sort of used as case studies to publicize that approach. But yeah, this is a great conversation. I'm really excited to be part of it.
Eric, I don't know if I don't think I've told you, I don't think you would know. I know of one pairing that came out of this ICDS where we have one person in the classroom and one person who has the PhD credentials, and they are talking very seriously about what they're doing, how they're going to be collaborating over the next 2 years. I'll drop names as soon as I know it's able to be publicly named who's working with who, but we know some of that is already came out of this, you know, just 2 months ago, and I too am very excited to figure out ways to support that. Luke,
so I could just say one more thing very quickly, and that is that I think the other important aspect of research findings is advocacy. And yes, they might be useful for us as practitioners to reflect on our work, but might also be useful to justify our work and talk about its value to other audiences, such as parents, managers, policymakers. So when we're thinking about why research might be useful, thinking about audiences and translating findings for different audiences, I think is part of it.
Luke, I saw your hand was up a moment earlier.
I just wanted to say that this PERMA model, you know, comes out from positive psychology. You also have the positive education movement and so on. Is a very nice example of how research can actually inspire your practice. So if you look at all the literature that has been written about the PERMA model, and you bring your students to that, and then you ask them, let's use this PERMA model. Let's design a lesson. And you will, for every activity you do, you will think about the P, the E, the R, the M, and the A. What are you going to do? Why are you going to do it? And then they need to go and look at the research that has been done. That's actually very interesting exercises. They are learning to design activities, but at the same time, because they need to go to the research, they are kind of systematizing their reflection, and that for me is what research with students do. Is it brings you from more intuitive level of reflection to a systematic level of reflection, and that is what I think is very good for the training of teachers.
I love it. Jacqueline.
Hi. I mean, the reason I'm here is really to find to overcome some of the practical problems of doing research in a Dalcroze setting, which Eric talked about and John talked about too. I mean, for instance, it's not thought out in any degree whatsoever, but we have a number of excellent Dalcroze teachers, one of whom is in the room. Hi, Catherine. Working in conservatories in the UK. And as Eric said, I mean, for me, it would be great to do research in order to disseminate our work and not just to those institutions, but beyond those institutions as well, and to somehow, I had some notion that we could somehow engage all the teachers working in conservatories at the moment into a sort of umbrella piece of research. I absolutely have no idea how this would work or what it would be called or what we'd be doing, but it's just a very pie in the sky idea at the moment. So we could tell people just how fantastic this is. So we could get it into our music magazines in this country. So we could show other conservatories it's happening here, and this is it's so effective, and this is why it's so effective, because we have the research to show that it's effective. I did an MSc in neuroscience and education a few years ago. My dissertation was looking at, I don't know whether any of you know Paul Howard-Jones at University of Bristol, but looking at his science of learning, and that's what I was particularly interested in. And I knew, for sure that Dalcroze is just a brilliant way to learn, because it engages the whole of us, body, soul, emotions, thoughts, etc., etc. So we've got a lot to say, and so it's the practical things. Who would we go, as Eric was saying, who would we go to help us develop a research design? Who would we go to get ethical clearance? Who would we go to sort of come alongside us and work with us and keep us all on track? So I'm here from a very practical perspective. Who can help us?
Eric, do you want to try to talk a little bit more about the vision for the incubator?
Sure. In terms of offering that side of it, of the professors, early researchers, that is not none of this is in a way my imagination. I mean, many music education professors that will tell you that they know there's great work going on out there that they would love to connect with. And certainly early career researchers, especially at like a postdoctoral level, they are really looking for an exciting publication opportunity. And I do think that, one of the paradigm examples from this summer's ICDS conference, sorry if I didn't give some context in some of the things I said, but I was told I had 5 minutes and I panicked. Anyway, there were two Polish sisters who were somehow doing Dalcroze with the Inuit, right? So like there's all these really interesting situations out there that I think a lot of early career researchers would love to write up. I went to school with some, they're now early career or late or mid, and I know that they felt that way. And I watched the difficulty of getting these PhDs set up that involved a classroom. I mean, so much had to go into finding that classroom, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, that I think people are eager to have, if they can, that side of it can be facilitated, that makes a big difference to the researchers, if that's a helpful thing to say.
Andrew, and then Jim.
Just two things. One about John's comments. John, it's really nice to see you, by the way. It's been a while, so nice to see you. And then just a comment about the way research is being kind of conceived in this conversation. I think that what you mentioned about the jazz improvisers in the language area is a good example of this kind of comparison issue. That apparently at least the same things that end up causing language activity or the same brain areas that language behaviors activate, music also activates. Okay, so it allows us to at least theorize about how these things would be related. I note that there's plenty of music theory and musicology that already knows that musical improvisation is like language in its interactive properties. So I think about like the book Saying Something by Ingrid Monson is about interaction as social interaction and improvisation that doesn't need neuroscience necessarily. So I'm not saying it adds nothing, but I continue to wonder what exactly it does give us that we can have. And along those lines, I'm inclined to ask a kind of provocative question about research here, which is that say that you did go and work with someone who has the research credentials, that knows how to design a study and write it up in a scientific way, sort of leveraging the power of that kind of explanation for policymakers and so on, because for whatever reason in society, this kind of knowledge is valued above this kind of knowledge. And so if we can just put it in this format, then we'll be able to, to convince policymakers or to advocate for the work. What would happen, and I know that there's a power disparity, by the way, which is kind of conspicuous, I think. But, what would happen if the research finding, didn't bear out, and you did the study, and there's no effect, of whatever thing that you have in mind? I mean, would it dissuade you that the practice really does have special value? I mean, I'm not a Dalcroze expert. I participated in much of it, and it wouldn't dissuade me. I mean, clearly, it's like I don't need the research to tell me in a way. So, I just wondered what would happen if the study didn't return a positive result. How would it affect, your conception of the value of the practice? Anyway, I know it's a bit of a provocative question, but I think it's definitely one worth reflecting on.
Oh, I mean, if I was writing up two Polish sisters working with the Inuit, I wouldn't set up a quantitative experimental design like the kind you and I do every day, Andrew. That would be more in the hands of different kinds of research methodologies, I think. I mean, I would set this up to be quite agnostic as to methodology. But then I think there are other classroom situations where having some kind of statistical test would be a relevant endpoint. But I don't think that would always be so. That's my quick two.
Very good. Yeah. I think Jim was next and then Luke.
Yes, this is going to be a comment that's a bit out of the box, but it's linked to everything that has been said so far. I'm not a Dalcrozian by any means, but I have had more than a half-century experience in research, physiology, biomechanics, and more recently, in the last 20 years or so, in geriatrics, particularly geriatric hospitals where there are cases of dementia, in which there's a clear distinction between people who are diagnosed on the basis of cognitive tests, and yet their limbic systems are completely intact. They have all of the emotions, all of the responses that even though they cannot articulate it. And my colleagues in Japan, with whom I'm continuing to work, are exploring going beyond this kind of standard things where you can put a score on a cognitive test, and using dance, using storytelling, using pictures, photograph, in order to elicit that which in the brain does not project to something where the cognitive things can take over and you can actually articulate what you're seeing. But you can see, smiles and frowns and tears, and even though they cannot. And I've been speaking to him about the potential role of Dalcroze, particularly in the link between what you listen to, which speaks to one part of the brain, and the whole motor stuff, which has got biomechanics in it, and sway and rhythm, and all of this linkage that I think is one of the basic ideas in Dalcroze between body and what your brain is doing, which is a potential big time, in my view, and in my colleagues' view in Japan, a big time potential step in therapy for elderly people in the geriatric population who have particularly behavioral and psychological symptoms of dementia. And I would be more than delighted if somebody in the whole Dalcroze worldwide community could connect in this effort, rather than just giving them, oh, we got a problem here. Okay, how about just some more drugs? Yeah, sedate.
Yep.
And I mean, to me, that sedation, you see a whole room and everybody is like this. I mean, that's just criminal.
Yeah.
There is an entire brain that is still functioning. It doesn't function in the kind of silly ways, they're not silly, but in the kind of restricted ways that we quantitative scientists, which I'm one, like to use. Oh, well, then we can do statistics. That's not the issue here. And for me, Dalcroze is a perfect example of a wide open opportunity. I'll stop there.
Thank you. Thank you, Jim. And it's been really nice having you here. And just as Eric has already started to explain, that incubator idea is us trying to find ways to help pair crowds with crowds. And so we would love, as your research continues and you think you maybe have an opportunity, we'd love to know more about that. We have about just 5 minutes left. I saw Luke had a hand up, and I think John did too. And we're coming to the end. I know Andrew has to leave early. So just before Andrew clicks out, Andrew, thank you so much for being here. It's been such a joy to say hi to you and to have you here.
It's a pleasure, Peter. I'd love to continue the conversation. Feel free to get in touch. And I'm already in touch with many of you, but feel free to get in touch.
Luke, did you have something to add to one of the last points?
Very short. First, to be provocative, I don't think we should do research because we want to prove something. I think we should do research because we want to find something out and understand better. So that's very important. Everything goes to what do I want to find out, and then the methods are there. So it's not first the methods; it's first the question. This is, I think, very important. And to find the questions, that's exactly, I think, Andrew's nice idea is that we get together with different communities. Like, for example, the Dalcrozians should all go to ESCOM conferences, for example, because, my God, you will see a lot of things that you will say, oh, you know what? And the same, all the people who are at ESCOM conference, they should come to the ICDS conferences because they will also say, oh, but and so that's, I think, something that we should really work on, because those connections will probably incubate a lot of fantastic research with Dalcroze.
Very good. John?
Yeah, I'm all for that, Luke. That's a great idea. Maybe trying to timetable conferences to be contiguous or even overlapping can help there. I just wanted to just pick up very briefly on Jim's point. I think that sounds very, very exciting. And I'm just wanting to clarify, maybe we can do this outside this meeting, exactly what would help Jim there. Is he looking for Dalcroze practitioners in Japan? Because if so, obviously we have lots of contacts there. Or is it something else? So just to sort of, if that conversation can carry on, I think we can definitely help Jim to find the people he needs there, I think, to start a conversation.
Thank you. Well, I think we're about at the end here. What a cool little meetup. I continually be impressed by what the VDM pulls off. And you, of course, understand it's not me, certainly, and I don't think it's Veronica and Emma. It's just providing a forum for the richness of the community that already exists has been just so valuable to me personally. I'm so thrilled to see everybody here. I'm extra thrilled that we're recording this and this will get to live in the archives and that these conversations can continue. I think I just want to say thanks to Luke and to Eric and to Andrew again for carving out a little bit of time and being willing to clear their schedules to give us even 5 minutes of those short presentations, which were more than enough to get us all thinking. I'll encourage all of you to stay in contact. As John is saying, our web is wide. It is truly international. And the Dalcroze connections, we have colleagues in every corner of this world, and they're all doing really cool work. And there's opportunity after opportunity. A lot of it, I think, is just trying to make the right connections. So please reach out to Veronica and me and Emma if there's any way that we can help you make those connections. We'll be working with Eric and the ICDS and the incubator idea to try to publicize that and to make it as real as all of us are able to make that happen. And please come back. Again, subscribe to the calendar, subscribe to the mailing list so you know when things are happening. And I think that's it. Veronica, anything more to add? Oh, we don't hear you. You were muted.
Oh no.
Oh, there you are.
No,
Now we can hear you.
Okay. Thank you. I just wanted to say thank you. It's awesome to be here with all of you and to hear these conversations and be part of them. And I know there's plenty of people who were just listening in today. And so if you have other thoughts later, please post on the Facebook group or email us. I know not everyone is up for in the moment discussion. So if you have other thoughts that you wanted to share, please do.
Thank you. We do our best to start on time and end on time. So it's on the hour. We thank you all so much for your time.
Thank you.
and
Thank
see
you. Bye bye,
Thank you for
everybody.
the invitation.
We will see you at the next one.
Thank you.